Now, we don't want to think about being in an auto accident, but if it happens specifically on private property, what do we need to know? Well, Catherine Stone from Barbas Law is here to tell us. So I'm assuming it's obviously already different from private property versus public property and on roads.
Yes. Well, a lot of, and I love bringing in cases that I have or examples from cases that I have. And for instance, I recently signed up an individual who had had an accident in a parking lot, a commercial parking lot. He's on his way to go get his hair cut.
I'll say, because it happens. People drive crazy in parking lots.
And, he was quite miffed that when they called the police to do an accident report, the police said, well, that's private property. We don't have to unless someone's claiming an injury, a severe injury that requires an ambulance, or that there's more than $500 in property damage.
Wow.
Now, in this case, there was more, but at the time, you don't know how much property damage is going to be. But typically, at least in this area, the police won't necessarily come out if it's on private property, unless it's a major, death or fatality involved.
Well, and I got to ask, I mean, normally that's what you want to get, that police report if you're going to have a case. So what do you do about obtaining that kind of evidence or that kind of police report?
Especially if you know that you feel that you weren't at fault as a result of the accident.
Yeah.
So what I don't think a lot of people understand is that while the police may not come out and file a crash report or complete a crash report, you have the ability within 10 days of that crash to march down to the police station, assuming that you've already gotten the other person's information, their license tag number, their name, their address, their phone number, and their insurance information, which you should never leave in any accident scene without having that information.
Okay.
And you can go fill out a crash report yourself. And if need be, the officer may or may not conduct further investigation depending on what it may be, but typically they don't. You just get a crash report. Not typically, there's somewhat different with an accident report.
And so I'm curious, if you have, obviously you get the person's information that you were involved with and say 2 cars were involved in this crash as an example. How do you know if the other person goes and files a crash report, or should you do it regardless if you know the other party is going to do it?
Well, you should be able to get a copy, but that doesn't always happen.
Okay.
So I would always just encourage, if you've been involved in an auto accident and you know that, and you feel very strongly that you were not at fault, you have nothing to lose except to go down to the police station and go ahead and file that crash report. And make sure you get a copy of that or the crash report accident number. Now, sometimes officers, especially on public property, they won't generate a crash report for you right then and there. Make sure before you leave that accident that you have that crash report number. Because when you come and see us, we can then request that report through an automated system as long as we have that number.
Have that number. Okay. And I'm assuming having that number and then having that report obviously just helps the case, especially if the person's not at fault. Okay. So whether you're private property or public property, you got to still get the other party's information and get that report. And possibly give Catherine a call. She's got all the information to hook you up and she'll take care of you. Once again, it's 800 Barbas Law, or you can go to barbaslaw.com/knowyourrights.